Welcome back to Blessings, friends. Today, I have an inspiring conversation with Vin Infante. When I speak to people who know Vin, they all say the same thing. What a great guy. Vin is an expert in the arena of making people feel good. Perhaps this is because he knows what it's like to be mistreated. He's here to impact at least 1 billion people as a licensed psychotherapist, mental performance coach, and keynote speaker. From his New York roots to his time as a firefighter, his mission is to save lives by empowering and uplifting the masses. I'm so happy to have you with me today, Vin. Welcome.
Well, thanks for that intro, Mitzi. I'm going to need you to send that to me because that was probably the best intro that I've ever had.
Thank you. I do pride myself on my introductions. I'm a former writing professor, so
Okay, that
kind of my
explains it.
jam. All right. I want to start out by just cutting right to the chase. Just lay it on us. What is the secret to life?
It's funny. I actually kind of made a post like that this morning.
Oh,
So I have
geez.
no, I have this thing I do where every day when I wake up, I screenshot what time it is and then I make a post. So it's typically between like 4 and 5 a.m. You're going to see a morning thought from me. It's like my first thought in the morning. So
Oh,
today, my first thought in the morning, and anyone who's listening, well, by the time this is released, they won't be able to go check the story, but Mitzi, you can check it today.
I
I
will.
made I made a post and I basically said that life is meaningless, but we should not confuse that with life being pointless because they are two different things. The opportunity you have because life is meaningless is that we get to create the meaning that we see fit based on our values, based on things that fill us up, based on things we love, based on things we do. If life was pointless, then there wouldn't be any real reason to be here, right?
We wouldn't be
And
here, right?
exactly. And so my thing is that the secret to life is creating the meaning you want, figuring out what fills you up, mind, body, and soul, and then living in a way that's aligned that you could do more of that every single day so that you live a life that's fulfilling and meaningful.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I knew we'd get off to a great start. Okay, so now we're going to take it back. I want to know where you were born and what your family was like at that time.
So I was born in Staten Island, New York. I've been here my whole life. I'm still here. And my family's a bit of an old school Italian family where it was important to have Sunday dinners together. It was important to have a big grounded family aspect where family is all you got, or you could always count on family and spend all the holidays together and spend a lot of time together and meet up on weekends and dinners and things like that. So it's always been kind of this Italian heritage that has shined through in my life.
That must provide a lot of richness for you.
It definitely does. I mean, truth be told, I don't want to live in New York anymore. I don't really like it here and I don't want to be here. However, when I do an analysis of what my values are, family is obviously one of the top values I have. It's been instilled in me and I still hold true to that to this day. So I'm not leaving because then that would mean I'm not going to be near my family. And that's not something that I'm willing to do.
That really resonates with me. I have the exact same situation. I sold my house in New Jersey when my kids got old enough to leave home, and I bought a small place in Pennsylvania to be near my family.
Yeah.
And I also don't think this is the ideal place for me to be living. I would love to be someplace warmer, but there's a lot of beauty here. And the same thing, I'm not leaving because I'm not going to move away from my 82-year-old dad right now.
Yeah, I feel that. My parents, I would say at this moment in my life, my parents are a little bit older. They're in their, my dad's in his 70s, my mom is in late 60s. And I think about that as well, especially because only one of my grandparents made it past 80.
Oh,
And the grandparents on my dad's side I never even met, passed very young. And then my grandfather passed when I was young. He was like 81. And my grandma, my nana, she lived until she was about 90 something, but she's the only person I have for longevity in my family. So I really think about that and I think about what's important. And to me, family is extremely important. The time I may never get more of is extremely important. And there was a podcast that really hit home. They were having this conversation, and the guy lived like across the country from his parents. And he talked about how, he sees them on holidays, like, but the big ones, right? So Thanksgiving, Christmas, and maybe sometimes Easter. And he always makes it a point to do that, but in between he doesn't see them much. And so the guy was like, all right, well, let's just say you have about 10 more years or so with your parents. He's like, I want you to think about this. You don't have 10 years, you have 20 visits. You're only going to see your parents 20 more times if they die in 10 years. And
Oh.
I think about that because I want to move, like maybe even out of the country, like go to Europe or something.
Mm.
And I'm not willing to only have 20 visits with my parents.
I've heard that before, and that always, always hits home. That's the way you got to think about it.
Yeah.
So, looking back at your life, can you come up with your very earliest memory to share with us?
Good memory or bad memory?
The first one, whatever it is.
Well, this one, I'm not entirely sure if it's a memory because I saw the VHS tapes, and
Mm.
anyone who's my age or older, you know what a VHS tape is. And for anyone who doesn't, it's this box that you would rewind with a pencil and it plays your videos. For any of the younger listeners out there. And this one is pretty funny. It's when I was younger around Christmas, I was a very enthusiastic child. And so I remember I was opening a gift and my mom's like, "What is it?" And I'm like, "It's a this." And I just held it up because I didn't really know what things were. So it would be funny and then everybody would laugh because obviously I didn't really know what it was, but that was my way of announcing to the world every gift I opened.
That's
So I
so
remember
cute.
seeing those VHS tapes, so that's why it's very vivid, but I don't know if I actually remember it, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Usually when I'm asking that question, if I'm teaching a class or something and we're working with early memories, I will actually ask that for people to differentiate, make sure it's something you can actually remember. But for these purposes,
Yeah.
I don't think it matters. And I love that that's the thing you remember because it kind of fits with what I know of your personality is that you are a funny person, that you have humor inherent in your personality. So how old were you when that was taking place, do you think?
Oh man. Well, let's see. I was old enough to form sentences. I was wearing a onesie, but it was a big onesie. And my parents were able to communicate with me and I was able to comprehend it enough. So I would say it was probably about 4 to 5,
Okay.
my analysis.
Interesting. And why do you think that's significant, that memory or that time?
I think that it's always, if we didn't have an abhorrently terrible childhood, I think there's always something to be said about going back to the childhood. It's the time in your life where nothing matters, where life is stress free, it's easy, where your biggest job is to learn how to play and have fun and be curious about life. I don't think anybody would choose anything else if they had a pretty decent childhood.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people tend to remember negative things above positive things. And you chose, when you originally went into that decision, it was in your mind already. Should I choose a negative or a positive? What do you think
Right.
that's all about?
I think that's just coming from the way I've trained myself. I don't believe that anything bad really happens anymore. I do believe that I think that there are people out there, for instance, that are rejecting love. I do believe that everyone is inherently good, but I do believe that some people choose to accept love, some people choose to reject it, more so because they felt love and then they had pain and then they went into more pain and the cycle continues, right? And so also for me is like I've learned to become this way because this was a part of how I've adapted to life. And it's not to say that I've masked things or I avoid feelings. It's to say that I can understand that we always have a choice. And the choice that decide to make and the choice that I like to make is the choice that gives me a better experience with life, which is usually something found in the positive experience.
Yeah. Is that something you learned as an adult?
I started my bigger transformational journey at about 23 years old. So I
Mhm.
would say, yeah, it's been a work in progress for almost 10 years.
Now, when you were a little child, let's say elementary school age, can you think of a word that describes that time? Just an adjective?
Uh, I've never been good at English. What is
Any
an
word,
adjective?
any part of speech, any word.
Is definitely interesting.
Interesting.
It's
Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
All right. So, in that part of your life after you were 5 and in during elementary school, what stands out to you?
Well, there's this one memory that I talk about. Actually, there's two. I'll go with the first one because it's on the lower end. It's like kindergartenish or first grade-ish. Is that when you would play pretend?
Hmm.
So I never really fit in. And when playing pretend, I was usually the dog. So I would be a part of everything, but not enough, right? Like I'd be a part of it by laying on the floor and then occasionally getting a pet. So that's probably like one of the more early brushes I had with realizing I didn't fit in.
Okay. So was school challenging for you because you didn't feel like you fit in?
School had always been a challenge for me for many, many different reasons. One of them being that I didn't fit in. I got bullied my whole life. The other being that I found school to be very boring. The other being that I had too much energy. My behavior was always marked as needs improvement. And I did not want to sit still. And I used to just doodle and draw all day because I found it found it boring to be there because it's just who wants to just sit at a desk and just listen to somebody freaking talk all day, which I suppose to some degree is what people do on podcasts, right? People listening to us.
Yeah, I find it interesting to listen to people talk, but I guess not when it's the teacher kind of droning on in
Yeah,
that
I agree.
environment, right?
This is way better.
Yes, this is way better. All right. So what kind of student were you then as a result?
Oh, I wasn't a good student. I mean, not in a bad way. I wasn't a good student like academically. I was typically always just kind of getting by, and I didn't have many friends. I was very nerdy. I wasn't popular. I was always avoiding doing my homework. My mom used to have to sit with me for hours, and I remember I remember sometimes she would like plead with me. She'd be like, Vin, please, it's 9 o'clock. I want to start going to bed. Finish your homework. And I just feel like, and it was funny though, because she still always made me do it, right? She was never the
Yeah.
mom that was going to come in and do my homework for me just to get it done. She's like, you have to do it. And you're going to stay up until you get it done. But I'm not going to be happy that you're staying up to get it done.
Oh my gosh. And she sat there with you.
She would sit there either with me or in the next room, and then she would get up and walk over and check, and she'd be like, "You did one question. It's been an hour." And I'm like, "I don't want
Oh my
part of it."
gosh. Wow. And so what do you think that was all about?
I hated school. There was
Yeah.
nothing there. There was no hiding that. I hated school. I didn't want to be there. I didn't like most of the people there. I didn't fit in there. I got bullied. Like, why would I want to be there? And
Yeah.
also, you think about it when you're young, you're really not learning anything cool either. I always sucked at science and math. I had a math tutor since probably third grade, and I've failed math virtually every year until I graduated high school.
That's so
So,
funny.
yeah,
I think some people are math people and some people are not. I am not a math person either.
I am not.
So can we talk a little bit about the bullying?
Sure.
Well, what was happening to you?
If you really want to make this conversation shorter, you could just ask what didn't happen to me.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, it was a wide variety. So I recently started writing my own book, and I started with my story because I think that's the best way to start anything.
yes.
And I'm just going back and I'm like, oh wow, there's a lot of very vivid things that I can remember happening to me as I'm writing it. I think I'm about 22 pages in. It's still my story. I know I'm gonna have to edit it, right? It's still my story. It's not even formatted. I'm probably over 40 pages into my own personal story if we format it, etc. But I mean, there was physical bullying, there's mental bullying, there's verbal, there's getting taken advantage of. There was a lot of embarrassment, right? A lot of confidence shattering things. I mean, there's a whole wide array. I think if you have anything specific you're curious about, I could definitely go into that because there's just so much here. I could talk for the whole podcast about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think bullying is one of those things that I don't want you to have to go back and relive. But on the other hand, like I want people to understand how important it is to recognize when it's happening and to try to intervene. Like if you're being, for example, someone's beating you up, did that
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah.
How come nobody saw it and put a stop to it, do you
Well,
think?
I think because most people are observers. I mean, you look at today's society. Now with even more exposure, people still watch and don't do anything. I mean, I can't remember the specific name, but the whole thing about the Good Samaritan law, where like
Mm-hmm.
if you're seeing something, you're supposed to do it because that woman was virtually, what was it, raped and murdered in front of like 40 people and nobody did
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's the reason because people are mostly avoidant, if you think about it. Humans aren't exactly made, though we're like the top apex predator, we're not really made with that I want to confront people and I want to put myself out there kind of mentality because we all come from a survival state. We all come from I want to just know how to live and keep existing until I can't. I want to conserve my energy. I want to protect myself. I want to preserve my life. And so things like stepping up to help other people put you in imminent danger of that. Because if somebody's punching me in the face and you step in, you're like, hey, you better cut that out. Somebody might punch you in the face and you don't know what's going to happen to you. And people that are very aggressive, people that are very out there, that are very strong, have these very dominant personalities. There's also been a lot of research that show that people that have these higher levels of determination, drive, and confidence tend to control other people, right? If
Mm,
you put two people in a room with two different ideologies, the person who's more confident in their ideology will come out convincing the other person, like
mm,
99% of the time. And we see it in all these other experiments done throughout humanity, like the shock test, where people were thinking they
yep.
were shocking people to
Yeah.
deadly levels because somebody just told them, oh, it's okay, go ahead.
Yep.
So I believe there's so many reasons why people don't get involved, but I believe the probably the main one is self-preservation.
Yeah. Did you walk to and from school?
I didn't. I took the bus in
Okay.
middle school. In 1 to 5, I was dropped off. Middle school was the bus, and then high school I walked to because I was in walking distance.
So how was the bus?
The bus was not very fun because you're crammed in there with sixth, seven, and eighth graders. And then obviously there's the pecking order. So the oldest kids are obviously the toughest. Then you have the oldest kids and the coolest kids who are the toughest. And then you come in whatever grade you're in. And if you're a weird kid, if you're a nerd, if you're a loser, or if you're cool, there's all these different categories. So I was never cool. I was never tough. I was never strong. I wasn't big. I was pretty small. I was a little chubby. And I was a nerd. I was like the kid who was looking at Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh cards or playing a video game or something. So that was me. So I wasn't going to fit in with anybody. And I would just be an easy target for the most part. Sometimes I would get fed up and then I'd fight back. And sometimes I wouldn't because I didn't feel like getting my ass beat worse. So it's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off. It's a trade-off.
Trade-off.
I interviewed somebody once who was bullied in a similar situation, and what he said was that as an adult, he has a feeling like he was providing something that the bully needed to express something, and that he felt he was able to cultivate even gratitude because that was his place to provide something and actually help that person to kind of express. So he
Hmm.
had compassion for his bullies. How do you feel
Sure.
about them now? The people who bullied you?
I think everybody that moves forward comes to some similar conclusion.
Mhm.
Like I understand that I wasn't getting bullied because I was me. I understand I was getting bullied because I was an easy target and they needed somebody to, let go of something. I like to tell people whatever somebody's putting you through, they're probably going through worse in their own lives. So it's very hard to be okay with that because it still doesn't make it okay, but it gives you some sort of way to accept what happened, right? Like it doesn't make it okay that I got bullied because this person had their own crap they were projecting,
Right.
but it helps with the fact that I don't have to make it personal. And if it's not personal, it doesn't have to be permanent, right? Like I wasn't
Yeah.
getting bullied because I'm Vin. I was getting bullied because I was the person in that person's way at that time in life. Where if I
Mhm.
wasn't there, it would have been somebody else. The gratitude that I have is not from the fact that I was providing something different for the bully. The gratitude I have about why I was getting bullied is because I'm still here today. And when you watch TV and you watch the news and you hear all that stuff that you really don't want to hear, you see kids out there committing suicide and taking their own lives because they couldn't handle getting bullied. So I'm grateful that it was done to somebody like me who's able to get through it, use it to be stronger and spread a positive message, as opposed to being put on someone else who would have taken their life and would no
Mhm.
longer be here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Did you ever feel like there was no escape from it? Like maybe there was no way out?
Yeah, I had a lot of mental issues growing up. I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and panic disorder. I had a lot of suicidal ideation, some planning, and some self-harm tendencies. And there were definitely points where I was just fed up. Where I was just like, I have a story that I was actually talking about the other day is that I was pretty close with my principal in high school. And that was probably at the height of like when I was getting bullied the worst and when my depression and all this great stuff was at its peak.
Mm.
And there was a day where I just walked into his office and I said, I was at a Catholic high school, so his title was Monsignor. So I just said, hey, Monsignor, I was like, can I hang out here for a little? Like I always did.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, sure, And I'm just kind of staring out the window. I don't really want to be there at all. But he didn't know what I meant by that, right? So I looked at him and I was like, I don't really want to be here. He's like, what, school? Nobody wants to be at school. I was like, no. And then he's like, well, what do you mean? But
Mm.
he pretty much knew. He just wanted me to kind of admit it, right? Because he was a
Yeah.
very smart guy. He didn't
Yeah.
need me to explain it.
Yeah.
But I said, I don't want to exist anymore. I just don't want to be here, period. And so then he had a very stern look on his face and he scribbled a few things down on a piece of paper. And it was very silent, right? Like it was quiet in that room. You could hear his pencil scratching against the desk. Like everything in that room was amplified in that moment for me. And it felt like forever, to be honest. Like he was scribbling only 3 words, but those 3 words probably took him 30 minutes to write. And he finally slid the paper across the desk. He looked at me. It was a very stern look. Like before, he was kind of neutral, but now his eyebrows were furrowed. He was very intensely staring at me. He looked me directly in the eye and he just put his finger down on the paper, like really kind of hard. And he goes, "Where are you on this paper?" And I just looked down at it and I'm like, "What is this paper?" And it says thought, planning, and attempts. It was a very, very basic suicide assessment form. And so I pointed at planning and then I started crying hysterically because I mean, that was probably the first time that I actually admitted that I've been sitting here thinking about how I could end my life and having to then admit it to somebody, which felt even worse. And I mean, nobody ever really wants to feel like they're at that point, right? So it's not an easy thing. And it's not an easy thing to admit to someone either, especially because you don't know how people are going to react. But I had a lot of trust in him because I had seen him for a while. And he also knew my family because funny enough, he was the dean at a previous school that my brother went to. My brother had a rep for being a troublemaker. So on the first day when I went into high school, he said, "I know you and I know your family." So he immediately called me out, but he also said, "I'm here if you need anything." So he kind of also made it known that he knows my brother could be a bit much. And if I need to talk to him, he's around. And so I formed a good mentor slash friendship slash whatever it was with him. And he helped me out a lot by just letting me hang in his office and talk to him like multiple times a week, honestly. So that was one of the lower, I think, moments of my high school career.
How did he help you to not move ahead in the stages?
He didn't have to. I think that's part of, I'm a therapist as you introduced me, and that's a big part of my background. I believe if you really understand people, you're supposed to be good at judgment calls. You may not win all of them, but you should have a good enough comprehension of the person you talk to that you might be able to know a thing or two about them. And he asked me, he said, "Do you need me to call someone? Do you need help with this?" And I said, "No, I'm okay." You know, at the end of the day, I said the bigger reality is that, and I'm going to say this, and I hope some people don't get too offended by it, but there probably will be one or two, is that suicide is a very selfish thing. The biggest reason I did not actually intend to do it, although I was planning, like I had thoughts, I had ideas, I had ways, I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll do it this way," or was the image. Now I'm a very visual person, and I basically burned an image into my mind of my mom coming in and finding me. And that actually felt more painful than ending my own life because I couldn't imagine how much it would destroy her life. Like
Mhm.
it would be fine, right? I'd be gone. Who the hell cares? Like once I'm gone, who cares about my mom? Who cares about my dad? Who cares about my brother or my one or two friends? Like I don't have to care about them. If I take my life, it's a very permanent solution for a very temporary problem. But the reality is that you have to think about that. And I hate when people sit there and they're like, "Suicide isn't selfish. You don't know what they're going through." It's like, no, that's bullshit. I know what they're going through and I know it's selfish.
Mhm.
I know it's selfish because I know what it's like to consider how other people would feel if I was gone, to the point that that's actually the only reason I didn't do it. Because to be fair to the people who are struggling out there who don't have anyone to consider them, that's even harder. Because I might sit here and say, honestly, if I didn't have my mom or my dad who cared about me, maybe I would have done it.
Yeah.
But if you have people that care about you and you don't consider them, that's very selfish.
Yeah. And then there are people who maybe don't realize that people care about them.
That's correct too. That is.
Yeah, that's a tough time. I'm really glad that you made it through that time. I want to ask you a tough question. Besides that moment, what was the worst thing that a bully ever did to you? in high school or at any time?
This story makes me laugh, but it is definitely the worst thing.
Okay.
I find a lot of this story is, in my opinion, it's freaking hilarious. But it was the thing that most people would probably drop their jaw and be like, "Oh my God, that happened to you." And at the time, it sucked, to be fair. I'm just so at peace with it now that I find it absolutely hilarious. So I hope you guys too. So there is this guy, he was a football player. His name was Mike. And I don't know why Mike specifically liked to bother me, but he did. I mean, I guess you never really know why a bully likes to bother you, right?
Mm.
But I also had multiple bullies. It was just Mike was a different kind of bully. Mike was very handsy. So Mike, if he would catch me in the bathroom, he would kind of throw me around a little bit, like just throw me into a sink or whatever the case was. Now, if you remember before, one of the things I said is you have an option as a victim. You can either roll with things and it doesn't get worse, or you could get so fed up where you instigate and it gets worse.
Mm. Hmm.
I was at that point.
Okay.
So so I saw Mike one day. He was somewhat down the hall, and I was pretty much about to go into the bathroom. I had to go to the bathroom, and we just kind of caught eyes. I saw him out of the side of my eye. He just turned the corner. He was about to come down the hall, and I know he saw me because I saw his face turn into that twisted little grin that he's like, "I'm gonna get you." And for some reason, this was the best idea I had. Was I looked at Mike, I said, "Screw you, Mike. You can't get me today," and I ran into the bathroom. That was probably not the best idea at all because for one, I just instigated the bully, and two, I just ran into the closed space. Why would I don't know why I did that. But that in my mind at that moment was the best decision. I continue to make really good decisions in these next few scenes you'll see where Mike comes into the bathroom, door slams open. "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the stall and there's nothing you can do about it because I'm locked in here and you're out there." And now I decide I'm going to get even more brave because I think I have the upper hand. So I said, "If you try to come under, I'm going to kick you in the face until you bleed. And if you try to come over, I'm going to punch you in the face every time you try to come and you're going to keep falling down. So you're out there and I'm in here and you can't do anything to me, Mike." So he said, "Well, I'm going to give you the count of three and I'm coming in to get you." And I said, "Go ahead, Mike, give it your best shot. You can't do shit. I'm untouchable." I was getting very bold, as you could see. I think that bathroom stall was my impenetrable fortress for the day. And so he starts counting. He goes, "One." I said, "Count all you want. You're wasting your time." "Two." I said, "Go ahead, Mike. You ain't gonna do shit to me. You're better off leaving." And he said, "Three." I said, and then I made this really loud, exaggerated yawn. I'm like, "Oh, whatever." So it gets really quiet. And then all of a sudden I just hear deep, heavy breath, and then boom, this maniac that I was just antagonizing for a good 5 to 10 minutes just slammed his full body force through his shoulder into the door. And he did that maybe one or two more times. And all of a sudden, as I am sitting huddled on the toilet, the door, almost as if in a cartoon or a movie, it was one of those little crappy, like slide to latch closed type locks. It popped and the door slowly crept open. And I turned pale as a ghost. I was paralyzed in fear for two reasons. One, this maniac just slammed the door open. And two, all of my power just got taken out of me. 'Cause I was ready to defend myself from the barred position of the stall. And so all of a sudden, he's got that twisted grin on his face, which then very quickly turns into a snarl, which then very quickly turns into him grabbing me, throwing me around the bathroom into the walls, into the sinks, and then into the trash can, and then pushing me into it so that my knees are pressed up against my chest. And then the last thing he did was he spit into the trash can, where I was in, by the way. So he left. I guess that was pretty much it. I mean, he was already somewhat late for class. Obviously, I was going to be very late from class. Nobody came into the bathroom, funny enough. Maybe they heard some commotion going on. I don't know. But I had to wiggle the trash can enough that I could have it fall over so I could crawl out kind of like a little hermit crab. And then I was late to class and I had an unexcused reason why I was late, so I got detention that day too. So that was the most interesting experience I had in high school with my friend Mike.
Oh my God. What do you think Mike is doing now?
I don't know. Most from what I understand, most high school football player bullies turn out to be fat and don't have really
Yeah,
good
because
jobs.
that
So
was
maybe that.
they were early peakers.
Yeah, like I peaked in college. I didn't care.
Oh my God, that's terrible. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But it sounds like you have you come to peace with it, obviously, because you're able to make light of it now. But like, what did you learn from that and similar experiences?
At the time, nothing. That Mike sucked.
The mics sucked. The
And Mike
mics of the world suck.
and whoever made those bathroom stalls, I need to have a conversation with. Those are the two things I learned in the moment.
Oh,
But going forward, I would say that I learned that just everything's an experience, and it's not so much about what happens to you, but more so how you react to it. You see, there's only two ways to actually experience life. And one is you could passively experience by reacting to it and letting life define your meanings and things for you, or you could be an active participant in life and meet everything, every opportunity, and every experience with enthusiasm and make the most out of it. And to
yeah.
me, that story, probably the funniest damn story I'll ever get to tell in my life.
It's
So
a great cocktail party story.
it's phenomenal.
And just the way that you tell it and the way that you handle it makes you lovable. Like people are going to be, you fit in so beautifully now that it's hard to understand how you didn't fit in then, you know, if you want to use
Sure.
that word, fit, those two words, fit in, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so what kinds of positive experiences do you remember from your teens?
I got a few of those too. I have a great story on that one. I have a lot of story. You know what, Mitzi, you got me on this podcast at the right time because I literally have been writing my book and it's all about my story
Good.
for the past few weeks. So, I mean, this is all fresh in my head.
I
The
love it.
most positive experience I have is from middle school. When you're a nerd that doesn't fit in, there might be some place for you. And I couldn't find one until one day. I think I want to say I was 11 at the time. Me and my mom were driving. She was taking me, I think we were going grocery shopping. Because that's usually what we would do on the weekends. On Saturdays, my mom would do a lot of the errands. She would clean the house. She'd, go shop, do this, do that. And she would always take me with her because who's going to watch me? So we were driving and I was doing what I usually do, which is just space out and stare out the window while my mom is singing Cher in the background. And anyone who knows Cher soundtracks, if you believe in love after love, I know every damn word to that song because my mom used to sing her heart out to it. And I
Oh,
would stare out the window because I did not want to. So one day, while I was daydreaming and staring out the window, I saw this really interesting thing. There was this two-story plaza, and on the top floor, all the windows were blacked out. But I saw the name of this business was called the Video Game Arena. And I was like, now that sounds up my alley. So I did what any rational 11-year-old would do. And I screamed, Ma, at the top of my lungs while she's driving. And after the initial heart attack and her wanting to kill me for almost getting us into a car accident, I said, Ma, I really want to go see that place. Can we stop? And she very angrily obliged. And so we pulled over and we went in, and there was this really narrow door, and it had this winding corridor up the steps. And you couldn't see anything though, because it was just like this really windy staircase. But as soon as you get to the top, Mitzi, you ever walk into Best Buy and you smell the electronics? You know what I'm talking about?
yes.
As soon as you get to the top of the steps in the video game arena, you smell the electronics. And I knew something was great up there.
Oh, geez.
So I walk in and it quickly becomes nerd paradise. We meet the owner, who is the basically the only guy that was running the place. And he said, hey, he's like, I could give you a little tour. So we go around and he's showing me this place and I am in awe. This moment like took my breath away at the time. He had now online was still a big deal. Like most people didn't have online playing and online services enabled, right? Because I mean, this was still what, like 2000 or something, like
Yeah.
2002, whatever.
Okay.
And so he had a selection of Xboxes that were online or called live enabled, so you could play multiplayer games. Then he had two rooms full of computers. They were all custom built. They had these LED blue glow to them. They were custom built. The towers had flames on. It was so cool. They were all gaming PCs. Then he had two other rooms that were big LAN opportunities. So a LAN is when you get 6 to 12 people together and you just play local connection. So he had these two big rooms for LAN only, and each TV had a big recliner. The TVs were like 45 inches each. That's how big they were. And it had an Xbox, a PlayStation, and a GameCube, all for each TV. I was like in heaven. And I begged and pleaded with my mom to let me stay there for the day. Because, like, Mom, I will stay here. I won't leave. If anyone tries to kidnap me, I'll talk to the owner. I was like, please, 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 can I stay here? And he's like, yeah, he's like at the VGA. So that then became the nickname, right? VGA. He's like, at the VGA, everyone's safe. We monitor everyone who comes in. Like, it's just kids. They get dropped off. They spend the day. I'm like, Ma, please, 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 please. So she's like, you know what? Fine. Like, I'll go shopping. I'll leave you here for a few hours and then I'll come back. And if anything happens, you have your phone, but only call if it's an emergency. Because if you remember, calls weren't free before 9 p.m. and you couldn't
Yes.
get text messages. Like, so I said, okay. And I wound up just jumping in. He had these deals where you could like play for the whole day for $50 on the computer or like for a few hours for the TVs, etc. And I jumped into this room, the PC room, and I saw these kids that were all kind of playing together. And I just asked if I could play with them. And they introduced me to this game called World of Warcraft. And we were playing like all these other games like Warcraft 3 and StarCraft and stuff. And we just started talking. And then I sort of started building that friendship with those kids immediately. And that wound up turning into an experience that I still don't really know. I think my mom knew that I didn't have a lot of friends and I didn't really have many interests and I didn't really leave the house much. So I think at that age, my mom was very happy to oblige, but I wound up convincing her to basically drop me off at the VGA every Saturday for like the next year and a half. And so that became what I did. Every Saturday, I would go to the VGA. My mom would drop me off around 12, pick me up at like 8, have a whole day. The owner eventually, because we got to be so well known by him, he would just let us play for the whole day on anything we wanted for $50. So, I mean, there was a pretty big budget, right? My parents gave me like basically 60, $70 a week, 50 for the VGA and then $20 to eat with my friends. And it was very kind of them and very generous. And I'm very fortunate that they did that for me. But that became like the thing. And I had these 3 friends, Mike, Damien, Jerry, and Jimmy. Oh, sorry, 4 friends. And we would just meet every Saturday at the VGA and we'd hang out. We'd play video games all day. We'd walk, get some lunch. And that was like my life for the next year and a half or so until we started dripping off. And then unfortunately at the time, video games weren't as popular as they are now, where you open a video game arena like that now, people will be all over it. But back then, only the losers played games.
Mm.
So unfortunately, the VGA didn't stay open, and then friendships started drifting apart. But that was probably one of the best times of my life as a teen.
Did you stay a gamer?
Oh yeah, I'm still a gamer. I never quit. Gaming taught me a lot about life, and it helped save my life too.
Gaming helped save your life.
Hmm.
How?
Because when you hate your life, it gave me, I should say, when I hated my life, it gave me an opportunity to escape it. I didn't have to be this kid Vin who just gets bullied and doesn't like being alive. I got to be Spartacus, a paladin for the Alliance, defending the world against evil. And I also have always been pretty competitive. So I played a lot. I got good. I got good gear. I was an officer in my community. So like the guild has ranking systems, kind of like you have CEO and a manager, and then you have the regular employee. I was the equivalent of a manager in my guild. And the guild is this congregation of people that come together to do things together. And so I had an officer status, I had good gear, I had people that wanted to listen to me. I had friends all over the world. Like I met people from Australia, I met people from Germany, I met people from California. I still have friends to this day that I used to play Xbox Live on Halo with that I met in California. And they came to my brother's wedding. And I met them in person after like 15 years of playing video games with them. And That was my escape. It was my connection. It was my friendships. It was a lot for me.
It feels like you were living a double life, like Spider-Man or somebody, like you got to be a superhero online, but in your real life you were this nerd. Or I'm using your words. I don't think you were a nerd.
Sure. Well, you know what's funny is like it was very common ground. I mean, you look at the other guys that I used to play games with, none of them were cool, but we were all cool in our own way, right? We were
Yeah.
we were cool online. And so we had our own thing. And it just made it easier to connect with other people like you. It's kind of like people ask me today, sometimes even my clients, like, well, how do you make friends? Especially now that my clients are all, 30s, 40s, 50s, whoever.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, the easiest way is to go to locations where there are shared mutual interests. Like one of the easiest places to make a friend, go to the gym. If you like going to the gym, go to the gym. You know what you guys could talk about? The weight you're lifting, the set you're about to do. Hey, can I work in with you? Hey, do you need help with that? Hey, can you spot me real quick? Those things start connection. So
Mm-hmm.
now if you look at gaming, it's no different. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're all playing the same game together. Hey, we all want to do the same thing together. Hey, we're all spending hours on here. When you spend as much time as I spent gaming, you start getting to know people's whole lives. Like I would spend sometimes 10
Yeah.
hours gaming. You think in 10 hours, all we talk about is the game? Eventually, the game becomes a background thing while we talk about life. So
Mm.
that's how you actually form real friendships online.
I love that because I used to be one of those people who thought that online was just fake, that it wasn't real life. And then even just recently for me, within the past couple of years, I've developed some of the most meaningful friendships of my life with people that I met online.
Mhm.
And many of them I haven't yet met in person.
Yeah.
And now I realize that I was wrong about my judgments about online relationships.
Yeah.
It is a rich world, and it's definitely a place where you can find friends, because the thing that I always talk about with people who are struggling to form friendships, especially if they're experiencing bullying as children and teenagers, is the reason why it's so hard is because you're stuck. Like you're stuck in one geographical location, you're stuck in a school.
Yeah.
It's not easy for your family to move, although many families do try to move to get their kids out of those situations. And so now we're so fortunate that we have the online communities, and kids don't even have to go to school if they're really in trouble. They can go to school online now. So,
Right.
and so I try to look at those positives, even though I think there are also a lot of negatives to being not, in living in physical
Yeah.
reality. But it is really a blessing, I think, especially for kids who need to find a community and can't find one in real life yet.
I agree. And I agree with you as well. It's a very double-edged sword. There's a lot of things that I come to realize about how gaming was also stopping me from growing, right? Like it was great in one area, but here's another few realities is one, it didn't force me to work on my social skills. I did not have to become better in person because I didn't bother to connect with people in person, nor did I need to. I had this whole other world with people that I did connect with.
Yeah.
Number two, if you learn about the dopamine system and you know how the reward system works and how most of the reason humans even have drive is because we want to achieve things. Video games make it very easy to achieve things. So it winds up cutting your desire to actually grow and succeed in the real world because you're getting your dopamine
Mm,
fixes from gaming, which is very dangerous. Because the more you game, the more opportunity you have to continue to rewire your brain for looking for that dopamine as opposed to doing anything actually meaningful with your life. And I think the third piece is that it doesn't help when you are going through something in regards to allowing you to actually find solutions and answers to your problems. It's the easiest way to avoid things. Like
mhm.
forget your problem and immerse yourself completely in the other world. And that's really, really, really probably even worse than the dopamine issue, in my opinion, because
Mm.
you could always rewire your brain to find dopamine on other things. It's a pain, it's annoying, and you're gonna have cravings like a real deal addict. However, you can rewire the dopamine. When you avoid a problem, it just becomes bigger, more persistent, longer, and deeper and harder to work through. And I think that that's probably the biggest disservice you can do for yourself if you're trying to actually grow and change as a person.
Yeah. So what advice can you give to parents whose kids are finding benefits in gaming, but yet you know that they need other
Mm.
skills that they're not developing.
Gee, that's tough. My mom tried to get me off games when I was younger, and I would actually set up entire presentations as to why I need the games. And my mom would sit there and listen to see
Oh,
if I can convince her
I
to
love
not.
your mom already. I want to have a cup of tea with your mom.
She loves tea. Sure, she would be happy to oblige. I would like fight for my right to game, if that makes sense. I remember one time there was an issue in the game where somebody hacked my account. And to
Mm.
get it back, I had to provide like my photo ID and all this stuff. And my mom was so against it. She's like, if the account's banned, like, let's just leave it banned. You spend too much time on it, blah, blah, blah. So I put together like a 3-page presentation about why gaming is so important to me and how she needs to help me unban it. And I got back on it. But I think that's probably one of the reasons it's so tough is because the reality for some of the kids is probably they're going through something or they haven't really learned a better way to find happiness and success and fulfillment. I think that a parent could do a few things such as try to connect with your kid. You know, if your kid is playing a lot of games, they might be going through something. They also might not. Today's society is very gaming focused, which is, I mean, it's awesome, right? If only it was like that when I was younger, I would have been cool instead of a nerd. But now it is. Now it's like a massive part. You're probably not going to get your kid to stop playing games. It's just now going to be about limiting it or creating a more intentional use of it. So check in on your kid. Chances are, though, if your kid doesn't want to talk to you, you haven't checked in on them enough yet. And
Mm.
so they're still not going to talk to you. So don't assume everything's fine. Don't assume they don't want to talk to you. It's just you've lost their trust because you didn't make it a point yet, right?
Mm.
So continuously check in on your kids, like until they start talking to you about life and show them that it's safe. Show them that they can talk to you because there were times now in my life, my brother was an interesting character. He caused a little chaos in the home. And so there were times where I would want to tell my dad or my mom something, but I saw like they were yelling at him. And mind you, this is a totally unrelated thing, right? Because my brother was causing chaos. I had an issue I wanted to talk about. Those are two different scenarios.
Mhm.
But saw the way they reacted to stuff he did. And so it didn't make me feel comfortable to tell them. And don't get me wrong, that was just my young mind. It doesn't mean I was
Yeah.
right. I probably should have told them that I needed help, but I didn't. So
Mm.
think about that too. Like if you have multiple kids and they have siblings, how do you show up for all of your kids? Like, what are they learning from observing your interactions with your other kids? That's important too.
Mm.
And then lastly is teaching them, showing them new experiences. Don't tell your kid to go outside and play. Take your kid outside. Have them play with you. Be a
Yeah.
model. I think too many parents, because of today's society, one is that it's, you know, you got both parents working 2 full-time jobs. They're very depleted, but you have to make that extra effort. So I have a child. I am a very conscious father. I spend a lot of time with my daughter, and if I do, or should I say when I do, my phone is down. Like I
Mm.
don't care what's going on. Occasionally, I will pick up my phone. I'm not going to tell you I'm 100% perfect because I run 3 different businesses. I have a lot going on in my life. Occasionally, there's something I'm like, oh crap, I got to answer this. But that is rare. Like I am very hard. I get yelled at sometimes by some of my business partners because I don't answer my phone and something's going on because I'm like busy with my daughter. And
Mm-hmm.
to be fair, I don't care. The business issues will always be there. My daughter is going to be this young for this long. And I need her to see what it's like to have good, healthy relationships. I need to model that even when I'm tired, even when I'm exhausted. It's like you have one job as a parent is to be a good one. Nothing else outside of that matters. If you're a parent, you need to set a damn good example. If you're tired, tough. If you've had a long day, tough. If your kid wants you and they want your presence, understand that that is a privilege, especially because they won't want it much as they get older.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the times with parents, really about being more present, intentional, and just there for your kid and helping them see different things that maybe they didn't see before. Because I think that's maybe a part of why so many kids are into gaming nowadays. Not because of the fact that it's not a social thing, which it is, but I think some kids get more into it because their parents always scrolling on their cell phone. The parent wants a break because they're tired. The parent hasn't been very present or intentional or whatever they got going on. But that's not a good excuse. Like you have a duty and a responsibility to that child. So rebuild or continue to build that relationship wherever you're at.
Yeah. I love that answer. Parenting is the most important job in the world.
It is.
Was there a point in your life when you changed direction where you finally were able to reinvent yourself? Because
Yep,
obviously you have.
23.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned 23 was a pivotal year for you. So
Yeah,
let's just jump right to that. What was going
do it.
on at that time?
Well, I need to give you a little bit of pre-context
Yep.
because
Okay.
without it, the life-changing moment, the aha, won't make
Okay.
sense to any of you.
Okay. Okay.
So, all right, listeners, this is very important. I need you to hear about the multiple versions of me. When I was going from high school into college, I decided I no longer wanted to be this person. There's a great quote out there. It says, at some point you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was at that. I decided to start working out. I grew out a beard. I started spiking my hair. I bought better clothes. Like I became somebody I thought I needed to be. But the biggest thing I did, and now mind you, Mitzi, you can't see, but I have these diplomas behind me, and I know you can't see the names on there. But as you introduced me before, Vin or Vincent Infante is my name, and my diplomas say Vincenzo. Uh-huh.
Alter
Plot
ego.
thickens. Oh yes, very much so. The very cool version of me that people in college were about to meet, because that was the true reinvention moment.
Mhm.
So wrote Vincenzo on all of my college transcripts. This way, I had a fresh start with a cool name. I was no longer that loser Vincent. Now I was this cool guy named Vincenzo. And to some degree, it worked. I don't know if it was necessarily about Vincenzo, but it just worked. Going into college, girls started becoming interested in me. Guys wanted to become my friends. And I started growing a social circle. I started becoming popular. I started getting invited out. I was getting invited to parties. I was doing this. I was doing that. I was becoming a cool kid. I also started doing better in college. So, despite all of these things, though, internally, I was still a mess. I had some severe attachment issues because of the fact that, well, when you're used to everybody rejecting you and leaving you, you can't imagine what it's like. See, this is the interesting thing. People don't realize this. When you're not popular and then you become popular, you probably have even more mental issues than anybody because I had low self-esteem, low confidence. Now I had all these friendships and girls that were interested in me, and I've never experienced a safe relationship or people willing to stay in my life. So I had severe anxious attachment. I had all of these fears that people were constantly going to leave me. I had like if a girl didn't answer me back via text message, my day was crappy because I felt like she didn't care about me or she didn't like me, even if I liked her. If a guy went out with another guy, like friends, mutual friends, and they didn't invite me, I felt like I was excluded. Like immediately my mind went to, I did something wrong. These guys don't want to be my
Mhm.
friends anymore. So I had all these crazy internal issues. So my anxiety continued to get worse. My panic attacks continued to get worse. I had a therapist that I would basically call anytime I needed to make a decision because I would have a panic attack if I needed to make a decision. And obviously, the depression was worse too, right? Because it's like now I'm constantly dealing with never knowing where I stand with anyone because of these demons in my mind.
Mhm.
Suffice to say, despite all of that, I looked wildly successful. I was working two jobs. I was a personal trainer. I was a mental health worker at a hospital, co-facilitating and leading groups for therapy and helping out with therapeutic interventions and mindful practices. I was finishing up my bachelor's in psychology, which I graduated in Psychi National Honor Society. I got accepted to every college I applied to for my master's, and yet I was still this mess. Going to my master's program, same thing, except everything was worse. Now I started having like these mini mental breakdowns where I wanted to drop out of college and like quit life because I just didn't feel like I could do it. I wasn't capable, whatever. And all of this stuff continued to get worse. I graduated at 23. 23 was when I was a fully licensed master social worker. Took my licensing exam, I passed that. And I wound up quitting both of my jobs. I was done with my internship, I was done with college, and I was like, I gotta figure out what the hell's going on in here. I've been in therapy for years, it's not helping, it's not doing anything for me. My mental health is just seemingly getting worse. And now, at 23 years old, I have money in a bank account. I got my first tattoo. I'm in good shape. I have a hot girlfriend. I got a fast car. Went out and got myself a Camaro SS2. That's the version, SS2. It had a sports performance exhaust. It was fully loaded. It had a Corvette engine in it. Like I was living a very good life at that moment, right? Fully licensed psychotherapist, hot girlfriend, good car, some money, dare I say, maybe some somewhat good looking finally. And so, what's wrong with me? Society says if I have all of that, I should be good.
Mhm.
Society says if I have all of that, Not only should I be good, but if I'm not good, I'm ungrateful for everything I have. I fail to recognize all the
Mm.
privilege in my life, and I am a selfish person. So now it's like you don't want to tell anybody that you're miserable with everything you have because then you just get judged. But then also you can't figure out why you're so upset. So it's like catch 22. So you just feel alone again, right? So I was like, all right, I've been doing stuff alone for years. Let's see if I can keep doing it alone. So I remember it was this one summer day and I was utterly pissed. Not at anyone. I was in general because when you're constantly used to being depressed and anxious and stuff like that, you're just eventually you kind of get annoyed. And I'm sitting
Mm.
there in this day and I'm like, what is wrong with me? I don't get it. So I very angrily got up. I went into the bathroom. I was still living at my parents' house at the time. Luckily, nobody was home. Slammed my hands on the counter. I was just like, what is wrong with me? Don't get it. And I was hanging my head and I'm like, is it like life sucks? Is it like my girlfriend sucks? Is it do I suck? And I couldn't figure it out. And so I looked up at the mirror and I looked at myself. And then I was like, oh, I get it now. And I just stared at me and I was like, you're Vincent. And that was the first time in 7 years that I said my actual name. But why that was so significant, I wouldn't actually figure out until much later as I started creating ways to help other people, right? Then figuring out like what was my process. But in that moment, what I could tell you it became was me taking acceptance, ownership, and responsibility for my life. Instead of trying to be someone I wasn't, I needed to get back to a space of realizing that I needed to become someone else to realize the only person I ever wanted to be or even needed to be was me.
Mm.
And so in that moment, when I said my name, I took back my power. I said, you are Vincent. Like, that's who you are. But then I also decided that I needed to figure a few more things out. So I said, well, who are you right now? And I was very honest, so much so that some people would be like, you were beating yourself up. And I always correct people. It's like, I wasn't beating myself up. I was intentionally creating awareness around who I am. And
Mm.
there was a point to the things I said, though they were harsh. There was a lot of reason behind it. So I was honest. I said, well, you're a loser. People pity you. You're anxious, you're depressed, you're sad. No one's inspired by you. You are not a leader. You are not inspirational. You are not going to really help many people, especially this way. And then I said, well, is this who I want to be? And the answer is an obvious no. And then the next question was even better. It said, so who would I become? Who do I want to be? And that
Mhm.
came out even easier. I said, I want to be loving, inspiring, excited, enthusiastic. I want to have fun. I want to be a leader. I want to help people. I want to show people strength. I want to be strong. I want to be confident. And then the last set of questions were really the ways to dig in and create the momentum towards this identity I wanted to uphold, which was what would somebody do who was that? And I asked that for everything I
Mm.
said, right? So what would somebody do if they were a leader? How would they talk? What would they do? What would they act like? How would they make others feel? How would they feel? What's the thought process they would choose? What's the language they use? What are their behaviors, their actions, their habits, their routines? Do they have schedules? How do they sit amongst friends? Who do they aim to meet? How do they show up at work? And it just got granular. And I did that for everything, for all of my different identities, for all the different things I wanted to feel, think, and experience in my life. And then I just said, I'm going to apply these every single day because now I know who I want to be. Now it's just as simple as doing them. And it was hard. It was ups and downs. There were days where I feel like an imposter, days where I feel like a failure, days where I didn't hit my goals, days where I came out of character or out of goal. And it wasn't an easy process, but that moment was my pivot point. That was the moment that changed the trajectory of my life forever. And one thing that I know about making decisions and changing your life is that you have not truly made a decision until an action precedes it. And so my action after the decision was to start living in alignment to who I wanted to become by defining all of the things I would do. And similarly, that week, maybe a day or two after, because that was when I had my next therapy appointment, I walked in. I said, Bill, it's been great. This is our last session. I've got it from here. And I appreciate you being with me for these last couple of years, but I'm good now. And he was like, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I got this, my man. Thanks a lot. And I never went back. And that
Wow.
was the moment that changed my life forever.
That's an incredible story. I often will do that when I'm feeling unsure about myself. Go and look in the mirror and look at myself into the eyes in the mirror and just try to think about my identity,
Mm.
And I know that's like Louise Hay is someone who I enjoy reading her books and things, and she talks about doing that too, mirror work. It's kind of similar to that, isn't it?
I would say so. I
Yeah.
think it gives you that opportunity to just see yourself, which is very important. So many people try to hide from who they are, and so they don't really get any type of opportunity to change in their lives. Like one of the biggest things I love to tell people is you can't fix a problem that isn't yours. So if you can't find a level of ownership, accountability, acceptance, whatever, you're not going to be able to change your circumstance. And so when I said all of those things to myself, it wasn't an opportunity to be mean. It was an opportunity to be honest, because once I'm honest, I could create the change I need. And people struggle to get to that honesty because it bruises their ego. And don't get me wrong, it didn't feel good for me, but here's the kicker, right? My ego is smashed in by everyone I ever met. Like what? Me being a little bit mean to myself was going to do anything to harm my ego that getting thrown in a trash can and spit on wasn't going to do? Come on.
Yeah.
I had it easy at that point.
Yeah. I think that kind of radical honesty is rare and powerful.
Yeah,
'Cause the
100%.
truth is, if you are the victim of bullies and you're getting trashed in life, being honest with yourself about who you are as that person is only going to help you.
Yeah,
Because if you're the kind of person who's being victimized and then you come to see yourself as a victim and then that becomes your identity, then who's going to want to hang around with you? How are you
right,
going to get out of it?
right.
Taking responsibility for that, even though the circumstances weren't your fault, is the key to growth.
Yeah. Remember how I said I learned a lot about gaming?
Yeah.
Gaming taught me a lot about life. And here's actually a concept that I came up with. So this is original TM for anyone listening. It's not TM, but don't steal my shit. It's not
Well,
cool.
it's your intellectual property. We'll give you that.
So in gaming, there was this thing when you would do a boss fight, right? And a boss was harder than a regular fight. And you had to have a lot of people and you had to learn the mechanics to get really good at it. But there was this one mechanic, it was called an AoE, or an area of effect for short. The AoE was a specific move or spell that a boss would do that would damage everyone in the surrounding. So you had to watch out and you had to avoid the area, right? Now, it was interesting because it would always somewhat go outward. It would expand. This AoE would always expand. So there's more opportunity to impact more things in that area, like more players or more of the environment. Now, a lot of people might be confused. How the heck are you going to spin this into a personal development tip? Well, I'll tell you how. I came up with my own AoE because I realized that if you want to actually change your life, you need to have your own area of effect or AoE. But AoE in this term is going to mean acceptance, ownership, and exemplification. Acceptance from where you're at, the starting point, right? Acceptance of that moment in time. Like, let's just go back to gaming real quick, where the boss is standing. Where are you standing before the AoE happens?
Mm,
Ownership. What can you own? What is about to happen? Are you watching all the mechanics going on in your life and trying to understand how can you find pieces of it that you can control? Look for the deeper parts of these mechanics and how they work. And then lastly, your area of effect is your exemplification. Once you've owned all of these things and you've accepted these things, you now have the opportunity to ask, kind of to the point before, of who do you want to become, that identity. And then you have the opportunity to exemplify that every single day. And when you're exemplifying your identity or the person you're looking to become more of, it bodes the question of how would that exemplification look like in your life? What are the actions you would take? What are the behaviors you would exhibit? What are the thoughts you might think? What are the language you might use to describe life? How might you feel about things? And then roll that out and watch the ripple effects start taking place in all multiple areas of your life.
mhm.
Watch the area of effect as your whole life changes from that process.
Yeah. What's interesting about your story is that you were kind of doing that. You had become Vincenzo.
Yeah,
So you were already kind of doing the outside work, but you hadn't done the inner work until you had
correct.
that epiphany to kind of marry Vincent and Vincenzo.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So how in the heck does the firefighter thing come into your life?
That was a childhood dream. I wanted to do both. I wanted to be a therapist and a firefighter. And I obviously became a therapist. And then I was like trying to become a firefighter for a while. So, a little bit of proof for anyone who's listening and might feel like things happen for a reason, they most certainly do. When I was going through my master's program to finish becoming a therapist, and I was having all these like mini mental breakdowns and wanting to drop out of college, if I had gotten accepted the first time, now mind you, in New York, you could pretty much only take the firefighting exam 2 times, maybe 3 times if you're lucky. But 2 times is the standard because they only give it once every 4 years. And you need to be in the top 5,000 people to get accepted into the fire department. For reference, there's over 80,000 people that take the test every 4 years. So you need to be in the top 5,000.
Wow.
So, and mind you, you want to be closer to the front, right? So the first time I took the test, I got a 93. That put me at number, I think I was somewhere around like number 11 to 13,000, whatever the case is. Very far down the list. I was never going to get called. My brother, on the other hand, got 102, and he got called to become a firefighter. He got called at the time I was midway through my master's program, and I had committed in my mind because I was so miserable that if I had got accepted, I would have dropped out of college to go become a firefighter. So I didn't get in. I wound up getting that 93. It wasn't high enough. My brother went, became a firefighter. Then I was pissed and jealous at him for stealing my gene. Whatever. That happened. A few years later, now I'm a therapist, licensed, had all these different experiences, did some of the great inner work that I've done, whatever. And about 28 now,